So now, talking to, now we're going to talk to the non-justice system connected people necessarily, right? So, um, if there's anybody attending or watching this that's from the tech and financial sector, we really need you to come along with us. We've come a long way, but we have a long way to go. The existing detection technologies and reporting on OSEC is simply not enough, and we need to be able to intervene. We absolutely need the tech and financial sector to innovate, to invest, and become our strongest partners in this fight. And then if you're a community member, if you're a family, right? Like, you're probably wondering, how does this really apply to me? And so this slide's going to be up for a bit because I'm going to share a story for you at the end. But, you are a voice in your communities, right? Like, you can talk to the companies that you're using online. You can talk to the financial companies that you bank with and that you use. You can talk to your elected officials and your government officials and ask them, what are you doing on this issue, right? There is power in that. There is power in that wave of support and awareness. And you can ask for those things. So I want to share with all of you. So now we're talking to everybody. So lawyers, academics, if you tuned out for a minute, come back. So some of you may have wondered or may not, how does a guy from South Carolina, right, me, end up in Metro Manila combating this issue of OSEC? And I recognize I'm back in South Carolina right now, but my wife and I live in Metro Manila. We relocated entirely there. We're back right now actually because our oldest son was supposed to join us for the birth of his brother in May in the Philippines, but when COVID locked everything down, we stayed to continue this important work and to have our baby in the Philippines. And it was just time to come back and support him for a little while. But after the holiday season, when the borders open up for foreigners, we will return to our home in Metro Manila. So we entirely relocated for this. And the reality is that if you would have asked 20-year-old Caleb, if we could go back, if we could time travel back and ask Caleb, hey, 20-year-old, A, don't do anything else dumb, which I did lots of dumb stuff as a young person. But B, we would say, could you imagine yourself being in the Philippines combating OSEC? And I guarantee you that 20-year-old Caleb would probably laugh and blow us off. Because it just wasn't anywhere on my radar then, right? Like this wasn't part of any plan I had. It's something that God and life led me to. And so, I got into law enforcement back in 2006, like I said, and had moved up through all these specialties and was conducting investigations on crimes against children. So child sexual assault, child physical abuse. And I was leading that team when one day my boss walked into my office and he said, and so this kind of work is called ICAC, Internet Crimes Against Children, which is where my title kind of stems from. So my boss walks in and says, hey, Caleb, the South Carolina Internet Crimes Against the ICAC Task Force has said that we have a backlog of cases. As a member of that task force, somebody needs to work them. You're the guy, right? So, I mean, I was like, well, okay, boss, like you signed the paycheck. So, I remember the first thing you do, right, is most of these cases in the U.S. are generated from National Center for Missing and Exploited Children cyber tips, or NCMEC cyber tips. And you download this and it has the child sexual abuse material in there because you have to look at it, A, to catalog it for future court purposes and legal documents. But B, you got to know what kind of case you're working with, right? You have to, as the enforcer, you have to take a glance at it. And I'll never forget, like I said, my boss walked in, tells me this, I pull my first case, and I'll never forget that first image of a young boy less than 5 years old being sexually abused. And I had seen a lot of bad things through my career, right? I had responded to a school shooting in 2016. By this point, I had heard at least 100 children recount their sexual abuse in forensic interviews. But nothing prepared me for the moment that I visually saw that child being sexually abused. And I remember that it was a very visceral and like a physical reaction. I was sick. I was sick to my stomach. And I stomped down the office, told my boss, fire me. I'm not doing this. You can fire me, reassign me, whatever you need to do. I'm not doing it. And my boss said, well, hold on a second. Just finish this case. I think he was going on vacation or was on vacation. So he said, finish this case and we'll deal with it when I get back, right? I said, okay, I will do that. So we end up investigating. I find the IP address where that resolves back to, the location it resolves to. We do a search warrant on the house. And I'll never forget, we found tons of child sexual abuse material on this guy's computer. But I'll never forget looking at the walls, and he had advertisements for jobs to be the Easter Bunny for children. And he had flyers for children's roller skating nights. And I'll never forget that feeling as a professional, that maybe we were able to stop children from being sexually abused, right? The sad reality is he probably had sexually abused children, but we stopped something. And it was like a light bulb got clicked on for me, right? Like it became my passion. I went back to my boss. I said, whoa, don't fire me. Give me every ICAT case you can find. I'm your guy. So I started working on ICAT cases. I was the ICAT guy. And so one day I'm sitting at my desk and an email comes in and it says, International Justice Mission is looking for an ICAT specialist in the Philippines to combat OSEC. And my wife, when we were running through this yesterday, my wife shared with me, Caleb, you got the story wrong. So she has corrected my story. So I picked up the phone and I said, because it was just, I felt very called and communicated to when I saw this email. Picked up the phone, I called my wife. I said, hey, what do you think about moving to the Philippines? And, she's a small town girl from the coast of South Carolina. She said, I don't even know what the Philippines is. Where is that? And so I knew where it was because my grandpa had lived here when he was in the U.S. Air Force. But I said, okay, well, she said, I'm going to Google it. So we get off the phone and I get a call back from her about an hour later. And she says, Caleb, I Googled it, and the first two things to pop up were that Metro Manila has the worst traffic of any city in the world, with a picture of EDSA, right? Like the most stereotypical EDSA picture ever, cars everywhere, right? And she said, and they have the most natural disasters of any place in the world, any country in the world, right? Being right on the Pacific Rim and the typhoons coming in. And I said, okay, hon, does this mean you don't want me to apply? And she said, no, just don't tell my mom. And so I turned in my application later that day, and we moved 8,700-ish miles to be a part of this fight. And so I tell you that I don't advocate for everyone to move 8,700 miles away and experience ECQ in some other country, right? Like that's not what I'm advocating. But what I'm saying, and what I'm hoping that is speaking to your heart right now, is that we all have circles of influence within our profession, within our professional organizations, within our communities, with politicians, with business leaders. We all have contacts of influence, and we have to be a part of this fight to protect these children, especially here in the Philippines, but around the globe. And you know, I'm just always reminded, if those of us who have the ability to speak into these circles of influence don't use our voice to do that, then who will? Because these children are being trafficked and they don't have that voice. So until we can free them, we have to be their voice. And I just hope that you will be moved to join us in that and help us be a voice for these children.
Awesome story, Caleb. For those of you who are in communities where you think OSEC might actually be occurring, there is a way to report. You can send the report to 744-464 OSEC space and the report details. The next slide is going to show you a few more hotlines. And we can actually work with the CINI law to make these available on the event page on Facebook for those of you who want to have these numbers. And if you're not able to screenshot this immediately, don't worry, this will be made available to you. But you can report to the Philippine National Police Women and Children's Protection Center. You can also report to the National Bureau of Investigation Anti-Human Trafficking Division and the Department of Justice Interagency Council Against Human Trafficking. As we mentioned in the last slide, smart subscribers do have a method to report through this number 7444-64. And if any of you want to stay updated with IJM, with the work, please take note of our social media handles over here and find us there so that we can find you as well. On behalf of Caleb and myself, we want to say thank you for tuning in and just going through what we've learned and what we can do together. We have questions and a question and answer portion so our dialogue can continue. Maraming salamat.